What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to harvest some prickly pear tuna from my yard. You can see that this time of the year in the summer, in August, most of the prickly pear tuna is becoming ripe. A good way to find out is if you see holes right there, the birds are eating them, so you know it's ripe. You can see that they're nice red color. What would you say? A nice fuchsia color. You can see that some of these are almost ripe, but easy way to harvest them is you take your long tongs, twist, and you can put it in a basket. So I'll get all this harvest and then we'll continue to the next step of getting them cleaned. Now that we harvest all the prickly pear tuna, we got to clean them. There's a few ways to go about it. You can either wash it, or you can use fire to singe off the glochids. There's also a lot of fine peach fuzz spikes. But my method, I like to use water. Seems to do a pretty efficient job. So that's what we'll do with this process. First off, we'll do a quick rinse, and then I'll dump it all onto the gravel, and then we'll do a more thorough rinse. So this part can be a little bit time consuming to make sure you get as much of the spikes off, but that's why prickly pear products are expensive, because they are labor intensive. So you're not going to be able to get all the glochids or the spines out. You can see here, it's not going to come out, but that's okay. When we cook them and filter it, it wouldn't matter after that. So after we rinsed as much as possible, we'll just put these back in the basket and we'll get ready to put them in the crock pot. Well, it doesn't need to be a crock pot, it could be a stock pot too. All right. After we got all the prickly pear tuna washed up, now it's time to put them in the stock pot. The method I like to do for this one is that I take the tuna and then I poke it with a fork so I can let the juices bleed out during the cook. The reason why I do this versus just cutting it is after it's done cooking, I like to squeeze out as much juice as I can. Also, it leaves the seeds inside the tuna, so it sort of is less work after the fact. But you're welcome to also cut it, and then you filter it afterwards. So it just depends on how much work you want to put into it. So I will do this and fill up the pot. You can see that these are nice and juicy and plump. And we'll get this filled up. Okay, so after we poked all the tuna, filled up the pot. We're gonna get some water, and then we'll fill it up to the top of the pot. All right. Get it over to stovetop. Okay, and we'll get this cooking to a boil. Okay, and we'll get this covered up. Okay, and once it starts boiling, we can turn off the heat and we'll let it steep for probably about 2 to 3 hours. Okay, we'll check back on it in a little bit. So the prickly pear has been boiled and steeped, I would say for about 3 hours. I boiled it for roughly 30 minutes, and then I turned off the heat and let it steep for about 2 to 3 hours. So now that most of the prickly pear tuna has sweated out all the juice, so now you get this nice rich prickly pear color, and then you can see that the prickly pear tuna has sort of soaked the water and then expelled the rest of the juice. So this is what I meant when I poked holes with a fork. That way, if you want, you can squeeze out the juice to sort of extract as much as you can, or you can discard it as such. I did skim a little bit of the scum earlier. I did not record that, but you'd want to skim the surface. Looks like some type of cactus scum. So after that, you would filter out the juice, since you want to get the juice as clean as possible. And so this process will take a little bit more time as well to make sure the juice is clean with no sediment. And we'll continue to do this until the pot is empty. The other few options you can do to process the prickly pear tuna is you can use a juicer. I have seen that when people do that, the blade actually doesn't last too long because the prickly pear seeds are quite tough. The other way you can do is use a food processor. I've done that, and it's quite a pain to clean up. So what you would do is you would take the prickly pear tuna, cut off the ends, and then run it through the food processor. And then you would strain it through a cheesecloth. And so because there's so much pulp, that it actually, I find it to be more work and a lot messier to deal with. So I like this method because cleanup is not as bad. I mean, any route you go, it still takes a bit of effort to clean up, but this is what I found to be most tolerable for me. So what I'm using here is basically a gravy fat separator. You might be able to see the sediment still, even through a strainer. But I mean, this strainer isn't all that fine mesh, but that is what I have. Since this the juice is still quite hot. I'm pouring it into a mixing bowl so that it can cool down. Otherwise, I would put it into a milk jug afterwards. So depending on how long you want to leave this out for, right now, even after a few hours, it's still quite hot. So I will have to wait until it's all cooled down. Okay, so and then we will discard the rest of this, okay, and then we will continue on our process. Oh, gotta get this strainer first. So with that, you know, you can put less water into the pot with the ratio that it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, and depending on how concentrated you want the prickly pear juice to be. It all depends on your preference. You could get away with a full pot of prickly pear and about a half a pot of water. The flavor should still be just as good. And after I get most of the scum off the surface, I don't necessarily have to use the separator still. We can just go straight with the mesh strainer. Okay. All right, so there you have it. So this is prickly pear juice. From here, you can make prickly pear jelly, syrup. We've been doing a lot of prickly pear lemonade lately. You can use it for a margarita mix, sours, candies, pretty much like any juice. It's great. So you just get a pack of pectin and you can go from there. All right, well, if you like the video, like, subscribe, share. I appreciate your support. Thanks.